Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamhi, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you so much for joining me, Ellen Kamhi, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. You can listen on air or also on iHeartRadio, Odyssey, TuneIn app, smart speakers, or nccradio.org, or consider downloading our award-winning WHPC app. And then podcasts of the show are available after we air live. Herbally Yours continues to bring you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. Today, we're so happy to have as our guest Carolina Schneider, who has an MS. She is an RD, which is a registered dietitian, and she is known as the Green RD. And we'll be talking about plant-based nutrition and following a whole food plant-based diet. Carolina's experience, combined with her passion and knowledge, equip her to help others better understand the nutritional benefits of food and how to incorporate them into our everyday lives. And Carolina obtained her Master of Science degree in Nutrition and Dietetics as well, and is passionate about nutrition science and helping individuals improve health and well-being through food. You can find her at Instagram, Carolina the Green RD, and other places. We'll also have live links on our archive for you to very, very easily find Carolina. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Ellen. Thank you so much for having me.
So I want to talk a little bit about, perhaps you know or perhaps you don't know, I am actually part of a committee on the NIH. And they have recently started a very big project that is really sort of called Food as Medicine, looking at the fact that our whole individual health as well as our country's health could be massively influenced by the right food choices.
I love that. I could not agree more. I think we are now slowly learning, and society is slowly learning, that food does play such an important role in determining the fate of our health. And we know several types of diets, including a plant-based, plant-predominant diets, Mediterranean diets, are associated with lower risk for disease. And those populations who eat, tons of plants, fruits, vegetables, and wholesome foods do seem to live longer and live better, a higher quality of life.
Yeah, besides longer is nice, but feeling well while you are alive is, probably more important to the individual than the length of time, because so many people suffer from things that are linked to inflammation. And so many really painful illnesses widely known, such as heart disease and cancer and arthritis, have to do with inflammation. And having a plant-based diet can definitely bring down the amount of inflammatory cytokines that you're developing in your body.
Absolutely. And I think incorporating more of these plant-based foods is already greatly beneficial. Sometimes people think, oh, but I can't go fully plant-based, or I can't adopt a fully vegan diet. And, my recommendation is just try to get more plants, even if you're still eating some of your conventional animal products. Ideally you wouldn't, but if you are, just focus on getting more fruits, more vegetables in your daily life, in all your meals, and that already makes such a great difference in reducing your risk for these chronic conditions that you mentioned.
Now, as an RD, Carolina, what would you say to someone, and I've heard this myself, oh, I eat vegetables, I have ketchup, which has tomatoes, and French fries?
Yeah, so when we're talking about eating more fruits and vegetables, we mean to eat them in their whole form, unprocessed form. So as they come from earth, of course, the ketchup is highly processed. There are barely any tomatoes in there, a lot of natural flavors and, artificial colors, a lot of preservatives.
And sugar. Sugar has tons of sugar.
A lot of sugar.
Yeah.
Tons of sugar. And then we have, French fries, which are fried in oil that is saturated, that raises your cholesterol levels. So you're really kind of stripping away all the goodness of those vegetables. And, you're just using them as the base, but they're really far from what they used to be. And therefore, the nutritional content is almost non-existent at that point. So, Ellen, I think, just focusing on wholesome foods as they come from the earth, it's really the best things that we can do. All of us Americans and those, families with children, it's extremely important that you raise them, from an early age, introducing those wholesome foods.
That's true, and that's often not the case, particularly in the standard American diet. Many times when people come here, if they were living in a different country, they had a more wholesome diet there. And then when they move here, we get introduced, which is what's called the SAD, which is SAD, the standard American diet. So really keeping in touch with whole foods and fruits and vegetables. And one thing that I know you've been talking about lately is that a lot of people can get help by what's called the SNAP program, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which used to be called food stamps.
Absolutely. Yes. So I'm super excited to chat with you today about SNAP because I think it's something that a lot of us Americans are not used to hearing or are not familiar with the program. If you're not a beneficiary, you might not know what it entails. So, I love talking about it because it does benefit so many Americans, so many children also in the U.S. And Ellen, we're talking about this today because the Farm Bill, is revised every 5 years, and it's coming up now in September. And the Farm Bill really can promote or hinder the development of programs such as SNAP, which, as you said, used to be called food stamps. And therefore, it really determines how much access people have to nutritious foods like we were talking about. And this Farm Bill is ready to get revised. And I wanted to talk to you about some recommendations that I have as a dietitian and concerns about the SNAP program and how we can make that better so that more Americans have access to these great nutritious foods, but also proper nutrition, even through supplementation to make sure we're preventing disease and living a healthy, disease-free life.
Well, the Farm Bill, I didn't even realize it's up for renewal every few years, as you said. So many important things come through there. For instance, even the discussion about hemp and CBD was attached to the last Farm Bill, where they changed the definition and legality status. So there's a lot of important things besides just farming that come through the Farm Bill. And certainly SNAP is one of them.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that because, we do think sometimes, it's a Farm Bill, is just related to farming and agriculture, but really it's so much more than that. So, the Farm Bill includes provisions for nutrition assistance programs such as SNAP, which, like I said, helps millions of individuals in the U.S. Actually, 40 million Americans rely on SNAP to put food on their table each month. And out of those, about 70% of the beneficiaries are families with children. So, here now we're talking about adults and children who are relying on SNAP to give proper nutrition to their families. Although Ellen, SNAP does give access to many healthy foods, you can buy fruits, vegetables, you can buy whole grains, legumes and plant proteins. It also gives access to not so healthy foods. Like we talked about the French fries, you can really buy any type of food with SNAP. So in my opinion, Ellen, I think one, we do need more explicit guidelines on, what's included and how much access people have to these unhealthy foods and helping people make more educated choices for themselves. So, even though you may have access to the chips and the candy, how do we get these people to choose the more wholesome options so that they, can improve their nutrition? So
that's interesting. First of all, I have never seen anyone, I've heard this sometimes from some people, that people will get SNAP so they won't bother going to work. I don't think that's true at all. First of all, you really, a lot of the rules have to do with that you're working and you submit your income in order to determine your family size, your income, in order to determine how much SNAP you're getting. So it's actually for working people who just aren't making a huge amount of money. So I don't think it makes people stay home and not work at all.
You're completely right. There are several guidelines and criteria that people need to meet in order to benefit from SNAP. And, the amount they receive is based on their household size, how many family members, their income. And we know, unfortunately, we have such inequality in not only in the US, really all over the world, but so many people who are working, but it simply cannot make enough to provide for their families. And, when we're talking about food, that's a basic necessity. So these are working people who are low income, unfortunately, cannot, have the proper budget to buy food for their children. So this is why, making SNAP as good as we can make is so important, Alan. And I wanted to talk to you today about getting some vitamin supplementation into SNAP because, like I said earlier, people can buy food, which is great, but that's about it. So if people, as you know, most of us Americans are deficient in some vitamins, especially vitamin D, right? One simple change that we could make into SNAP to make it better for American families is to include vitamin supplementation. And vitamin D, in my personal opinion and professional opinion as a dietitian, is the easiest, the most crucial at this point. And also, there is no added cost to the program to include that. So that's one vitamin that I think, we all benefit from having adequate levels. And unfortunately, simply cannot get adequate levels through food alone, especially, like me, I'm plant-based. That's harder for me because a lot of the good vitamin D food sources are from animal foods. This is something I wanted to chat with you today because it's such a great positive change that we can make so that people can get, proper nutrition through food and supplementation.
So you're talking about the possibility, I don't know if these are on the table yet or they're just a Carolina wish list, because you brought up two things that sounds like it would have to be implemented through legislative action, such as limiting where you can use food stamps, by the way, or SNAP. That is present. For instance, you cannot buy alcohol or cigarettes with any kind of SNAP coupons. So you're talking about perhaps also limiting things, let's say like big giant bottles of soda, tons of candy, and overprocessed food. How would they implement that and say, no, you can use it for like whole foods, but you have to go home and cook them? Although you could buy canned food of whole foods, like canned beans and canned soup, things like that.
Of course. So I agree that, having convenient, wholesome foods like canned beans is a great option. Frozen vegetables is an excellent option. I think we just need more explicit guidelines on what foods are considered beneficial enough, nutritious enough to fall into SNAP. Whereas, like you said, it's really junk foods, right? Or what we call it, highly processed foods are not really contributing nutrition, or maybe just having, the money be allocated, more for wholesome foods, less for these highly processed foods. But Alan, I think a lot of this is education. A lot of it is teaching people what foods benefit their health and how to make these decisions. Even if they have access to the not so healthy foods, how do we get them to purchase, better options? One way actually is incentivizing people to shop at local independent grocers and natural product stores. These are usually more health conscious. They offer local produce, from local farms in the area. So that's one excellent way to get people to make better choices. But Ellen, with the vitamin supplementation, on the other hand, which is another thing that I think it's almost as important, to be honest, at this time, it's more urgent. It's something that's so easy for them to add to the SNAP program. You were asking whether this is on my wish list or something that's in motion. Well, actually, learned about this through this great nonprofit organization called Organic and Natural Health Association. And they're doing a beautiful job at trying to get this through Congress so that we can give access to vitamin D supplementation through SNAP. And, people listening may be wondering, well, what can I do, right? How can I get through Congress to help people have more access to supplementation? And this Organic and Natural Health Association nonprofit actually has done all the work for us, which is amazing. They written a letter to Congress, and really all you have to do is reach out to your local Congress by going to allforvitamind.org, and you click on the Take Action tab, and it populates that letter that this nonprofit wrote. You put in your zip code, your name, and it just sends it out. It takes about 2 minutes. So that's such an easy way for us who may not be benefiting from SNAP to help others have, better access to nutrition, including, vitamin D supplementation, of course.
Well, that's a great action step. And I want to remind our listeners that you're listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Listen live, online at nccradio.org or on iHeartRadio or other apps that you get your podcasts. And for more information on today's guest or topic, email us at whpc@ncc.edu or to me directly at naturalnurse.com. Our guest today is Carolina Schneider, who MSRD, registered dietitian and founder of Hungry for Plants. You can find her at Instagram, Carolina the Green RD. So that's really interesting. Now, let me ask you something, Carolina. If you're talking about vitamin D, you're talking about that it would be added to the SNAP program, like a coupon that they could use to actually get a bottle of supplements rather than a food?
Correct. So it would just be another option of something they can purchase, with their SNAP. So in addition to foods, they could also choose to buy a vitamin D supplementation. I mean, ideally, in a perfect world, I believe people should have access to all supplementation, right? But, maybe a multivitamin as well. But since we have to take baby steps when it comes to Congress and the Farm Bill, I think this is the most pressing vitamin that we need to address as a nation. So they would just essentially have the ability to purchase the vitamin D supplementation using their SNAP benefits. And the good thing, Ellen, is that, there are a lot of inexpensive vitamin D supplements out there. But again, if you're thinking about someone who's struggling to put food on the table, that's not going to be their priority, right? They're not going to buy a supplement. They're going to buy food, of course, as they should. So this just gives them, another way to more access to vitamin D supplementation. Of course, I always recommend that people consult with their physician, do your blood work regularly, at least once a year, get your blood work done, through your insurance and your healthcare practitioner, and check your levels. It's very likely that you are deficient, like I was, and like many people are, because we're working inside, we're not as exposed to the sun, we're told to be not staying away from the sun. The foods where we get vitamin D, a lot of them are animal based, like I said, so shellfish, eggs, dairy. Sometimes people don't have access to it, but even if they do, we've learned from research, it is not adequate to meet the levels that we like to see in the blood to prevent disease, prevent respiratory illness, like we saw in the last 2 years. Actually having adequate vitamin D levels in the blood, Ellen, reduces your risk for preterm birth by 60%, which is, such a great high number. We can reduce preterm birth by 60%. We can reduce the risk for cardiovascular disease, even mental health disorders such as depression. We see an association of having adequate vitamin D levels and your reduced risk for, depression, anxiety symptoms, and even cancer. So it is so important that all of us have access to this vitamin. And I think making that a part of SNAP, at least giving people the option to use their SNAP benefits to purchase their vitamin D supplementation, is already such a great step towards, making everyone healthier.
Well, I'm going to give out that website, and then I have some deeper questions for you about vitamin D. So to find out more about the program that Carolina Schneider is talking about, you go to allforvitamind.com, and there's lots of super simple action steps. Now, when we're talking about vitamin D, there's a lot of issues there. One that I'll bring up is that Medicare, which is the insurance I have because I'm old, does not cover anymore. They used to cover vitamin D testing, and they no longer are covering vitamin D testing. That's one issue. Another thing is the difference between vitamin D3, which is called cholecalciferol and is often non-vegetarian in terms of its sourcing, and vitamin D2, which is ergocalciferol, which is found in many supplements that are more like vegan-based supplements, but it is not as efficiently used by the body as a vitamin D source. So I was just looking for your comments about that stuff.
Absolutely. So you're correct. So the vitamin D3 is the more bioavailable, more actively used form of vitamin D in the body when it comes to supplementation. You can now get vitamin D3 in a vegan source.
Oh, you can if you have more money, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Ellen, to be extremely honest with you, and I've been vegan for 11 years, and I fully support this way of eating. I think when it comes to meeting your nutrient levels to supplementation, if all that you can afford is a non-vegan vitamin D3, I would suggest that. And my point is, I want people to have adequate vitamin D levels. And if money is it's the barrier, then I would say, go for an inexpensive form of vitamin D3. I get my vitamin D3, the vegan form that is now available on, Amazon. It's inexpensive, but again, this is so subjective, right? We all have different budgets.
I have found very often vegetarians have no problem with D3 that is sourced from lanolin because the sheep are not killed. They soak the wool, and this fatty substance comes off the wool, and that's what they're getting a lot of that cholecalciferol from. So sometimes people who are vegetarian but not strict vegan have no trouble with that particular sourcing.
Absolutely. That is absolutely correct. And again, if the animal is not being, hurt or harmed, then people may not have an issue with it, especially the vegetarian population. And that's great. I think we just need to be more mindful about getting adequate levels, whether it's, through vitamin D3 vegan or not. And giving people access to that is the first step.
I think it's that is interesting. Yeah. I never heard even the concept of SNAP being able to be used to purchase a supplement. So this is a whole new thought form in and of itself. And like you said, if it gets through, perhaps it will open to things like multivitamins for children and, multivitamins for pregnant women, like prenatal and things like that.
Absolutely. That would be a perfect world for me, because we know, especially with the pregnant women population, there's so many nutrient deficiencies that come with that, especially if they are not getting adequate nutrition through food. So I would be all for that, especially children with multivitamins. And think about, even for people who have the means to buy enough food, we still see nutrient deficiencies. Just think about these families that do not have the means, the financial means to buy proper, highly nutritious foods, and they are definitely at a higher risk for nutrient deficiency. So I think, SNAP is an excellent way to give people access to food, and hopefully, vitamin supplementation, so that this is one less issue that we'll have to deal with when in the health world is nutrient deficiency. So hopefully we can address that through SNAP.
And don't you think that, it's a very simple, inexpensive test to do a vitamin D level. And like I said, that used to be available. And now it's less available to get that testing done.
Yeah, Ellen, and I didn't know that about the Medicare. So thank you for sharing that. I think this is very concerning. I feel like this is the basic panel that people should have access to. I honestly think, your checkup should include your blood work. A lot of checkups, if you go to the primary care physician, they're looking at your sight and your ears, and they just kind of touching you on the surface, and you're not really getting into blood work because sometimes that's not included in your insurance. So I think that's basic care, is to do an annual blood work panel with vitamin D, which, you know, it is the vitamin where most Americans are deficient in. So, you know, I'm upset to hear that's no longer included,
Right.
and that's going to make it harder for people to find out their levels.
I know. It's so crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, I was able to, because thank God I can do it, just walk into a lab and ask to get the test done. By the way, anyone can do that. And they don't charge people that much if they come in and they're not putting a blood test through their insurance. So I think it was something like $30 to get my vitamin D level done. But, you know, I had to take the initiative, go to the lab, pay for it myself. So it's horrible rather than just include it when they were going to draw anyway, because Medicare is blocking that now.
Right. I'm really surprised to hear that. And as you know, I think the easiest we can make for people to get the blood work done, the better. It's unfortunate that you're having to take all these extra steps that most people probably wouldn't, you know, to be honest, if they don't have the time, the money. But so I think, Ellen, that's why, you know, thinking about the Americans and the families with the less financial means, how can we improve their nutrition? How can we make their lives easier? You know, they already have so many struggles. So I think, you know, one simple step, and again, it doesn't cost the program anything to add vitamin D as one of the items people can purchase, you know, in addition to food. That would be such a easy thing for them to add that would solve so many problems. So it's a simple solution, I would say, you know, in my professional opinion. And again, people can help by asking local Congress. You shared the website. I appreciate that. And also, Ellen, we talked briefly about how can people improve their diets, right? Whether you're on SNAP or not, but especially for SNAP beneficiaries, I just wanted to, let everyone know that you do have access to those local independent grocery stores, your natural product stores that often carry better food, and they have local produce, local fruits and veggies, and people can actually Google, the directory for natural grocers directory or infra store directory. These are two directories people can look for stores near them to use their SNAP benefits and get access to better, wholesome foods.
Well, great information. And thank you so much for being our guest today, Carolina Schneider.
Thank you so much for having me, Ellen. This is amazing.
The Green RD. And thank you, listeners, for tuning into Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For further information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamhi at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.